Okay, this is a command of evidence or a strengthens, weakens, in this case, a strengthens the argument claim, in which we're going to want to read the background in the paragraph, identify the claim, and try to figure out how that would be and justify it. Okay, so let's take a look. Many archaeologists will tell you that categorizing excavated fragments of pottery by style, period, and what objects they belong to relies not only on standard criteria, but also on instinct developed over years of practice. In a recent study, however, contrasting, researchers trained a deep learning computer model on thousands of images of pottery fragments, found that it could categorize them as accurately as a team of archaeologists. Here's our claim, some archaeologists have expressed concern that they might be replaced by such computer models. But the researchers claim that outcome is unlikely. So what do we have? We have computer models that categorize artifacts as well as archaeologists, as trained people. The researchers of the study, however, say that the computers are not going to replace the archaeologists. So I need evidence that shows the ability to categorize artifacts, just like an archaeologist, is not going to lead to a loss of a job for an archaeologist. Let's look at the answer choices. A, in the researcher's study, the model was able to categorize the pottery fragments much more quickly than the archaeologists. No, that shows the computer is better. That's, if anything, going to lead to getting rid of the archaeologists, not them keeping their jobs, right? So again, we want to prove the point that the archaeologists will not be replaced by computer. B, in the researcher's study, neither the model nor the archaeologists were able to accurately categorize all the fragments that were presented. Okay, this shows that their mistake rates are equal, and that doesn't really say anything one way or another about supporting, replacing, or not replacing one or the other. C, a survey of archaeologists showed that categorizing pottery fragment limits the amount of time they, that is the archaeologists, can dedicate to important tasks that only human experts can do. Okay, I think this is it. So even though the computer categorizes the fragments, maybe even better or just as well, the categorizing of fragments of artifacts takes time away from the archaeologist's work doing more important tasks that only they can do. So this is the answer. This is it. This shows that archaeologists do more than categorize fragments. They actually work on more important tasks, other important tasks that maybe the computer frees them up to do. Kind of like doing a calculator leads you to do more knowledgeable mathematics than just crunch the numbers. C is going to be our answer. D, a survey of archaeologists shows that few of them received dedicated training in how to properly categorize pottery fragments. So, all right, maybe they were untrained in general, but if anything, that would suggest they're going to be replaced by the computer. Unless you try to say they are going to get trained, now we're really kind of getting down a squirrely path. That isn't really going to be our answer. C is correct. Okay, I've got a strengthens, weakens command of evidence without data, and we want to support the claim if true. So if true, that means the statements in the answer choices can be taken as fact. Okay, let's look at it. Black beans are a nutritionally dense food, but they're difficult to digest in part. So difficult to digest in part because they're high levels of soluble fiber and compounds like raffinose. They also contain anti-nutrients, that doesn't sound good, like tannins and trispin inhibitors, which interfere with the body's ability to extract nutrients from foods, okay? So all these things are bad. In a research note by so-and-so, they claim, so here's our claim, that inducing fermentation of black beans using lactic acid and bacteria improves the digestibility of beans and makes them more nutritious. So what would I predict is the answer? Well, fermentation would get rid of the raffinose, the trispin inhibitors, the tannins, and the soluble fiber. Somehow gets rid of the bad things. So let's look for that in an answer choice. When cooked, fermented beans contain significantly more trispin, more inhibitors and tannins, but less soluble. No, that's more of one bad thing and less of another bad thing. I don't think that's going to be the answer. Fermented beans contain significantly less soluble fiber and raffinose, that's good, right, than non-fermented beans. And when cooked, the fermented beans also display a reduction in tri-spin inhibitors and tannins. That's the other thing that we want to reduce. That's good. That's going to be our answer. C, let's just check it. When the fermented beans were analyzed, they were found to contain 2 microorganisms that were theorized to increase the amount of nitrogen-based absorbed in the... I don't know if that's good or bad. That's not really relevant directly to our claim or the logic of the statement. D, both fermented and non-fermented black beans contain significantly fewer tri-spin inhibitors and tannins after being cooked at high pressure. Well, that tells us nothing about fermentation. The claim is that fermentation improves the digestibility, so it gets rid of the bad things that cause digestive problems. That's B. The novelist Toni Morrison was the first black woman to work as an editor at the publishing company Random House from 1967 to 83. A scholar asserts that one of her likely claims during her time as an editor was to strengthen the presence, okay, so this seems to be the claim. During her time, she strengthened the presence of black writers on a list of Random House's published authors. Okay? Which finding, if true, would support that claim? Well, we'd want to see a higher proportion of black writers publishing books at Random House during this period. Okay? So, which finding, if true, must strongly support the percentage of authors published by Random House who are black rose in the early 70s and stabilized through the decades. So they rose up and stayed at the higher level, basically in the period we want. That's going to be our answer. Let's check the others. Black authors who were interviewed in the 80s and 90s were highly... No, okay, first of all, the 90s is not right, and they cited her as a principal influence. The fact that she was a good editor, they liked her, is not the point. It's irrelevant. The novels written by Toni Morrison were published after 1830, sold significantly. No, how her novels did is not the point. D, works that were edited by Toni Morrison during her time at Random House displayed stylistic characteristics that distinguished them from works that were not. Maybe, but that's not the point. The claim under question here, this is irrelevant. The claim is that during her time as an editor in the 70s, she strengthened the presence of black writers, as demonstrated by an increased percentage of authors on the list. Okay, I've got another strengthens, weakens, command of evidence question, but we want to weaken in this case, the astronomer's claim. Okay, so let's take a look. Given that stars and planets initially form from the same gas and dust in space, some astronomers have posited that host stars, such as the sun, and their planets, such as those in our solar system, are composed of the same material, with the planets containing equal or smaller quantities of the materials that make up the host star. This idea is also supported by evidence that rocky planets in our solar system are composed of some of the same materials as the sun. Okay, so what's the idea here? Star and its planets are composed of the same materials, star just more of it. So the example here is, what would weaken the astronomer's claim? Well, if we saw that our planets had different materials than the stars, than our sun, or maybe more of the material than our sun that's in our sun. So let's take a look. A, most stars are made of hydrogen and helium, but when they're cooled, they're revealed to contain small amounts of iron. No, okay. That's not it. It's going to be a comparison of materials in our planets, materials in our sun. This can't be it. B, a nearby host star is observed to contain the same proportion of hydrogen and helium as the sun. Okay, that's comparing star to star. That's the wrong comparison. Evidence, C, evidence emerges that the amount of iron in some rocky planets is considerably higher than the amount in their host star. Okay, the star should have more, and the planets should have equal or smaller quantities. That's not true here. This is weakening the claim. C is going to be the correct answer. D, the method for determining the composition of rocky planets is discovered to be less effective when used to analyze other kinds of planets. No, that's not correct. Okay. The Souls of Black Folk is a 1903 book by W.E.B. Du Bois. In the book, Du Bois suggests that upon hearing black folk songs, He felt an intuitive and sometimes unexpected sense of cultural recognition. Colon, and then a blank. Which quotation from the Souls of Black Folk most effectively illustrates his claim? Okay, so this is which answer choice supports or strengthens the claim. The claim is that he felt an intuitive, sometimes unexpected sense of cultural recognition. So intuitive means innate, not learned. Unexpected is kind of surprising. Okay, so we need a quote. Notice the quote, the colon with the quote. Follows colons are examples or explanation, elaboration. We need a quote that shows or demonstrates innate and surprising reactions for this author to Black folk songs. Okay? Let's take a look. Black folk music still remains as a singular spiritual heritage of the nation and the greatest gift. No, that says nothing about the music. Helps him recognize his culture, his Black culture, I guess, intuitively, innately, or with surprise. That doesn't say anything to that. Ever since I was a child, these songs have stirred me strangely. Strangely, that's surprising. Okay. They came out of the South unknown to me, so not learned. He didn't know them, one by one, and yet I knew them. So it was innate. That was innate, not learned, but innate. Them as of me and of mine. This is, I think, going to be our answer, right? They stirred me strangely. I knew of me and mine. That's his culture, basically. Me and mine is his culture. Okay, that's what he's referring to. This is going to be the answer. C. Caricature has sought again to spoil the quaint beauty of the music and has filled the air with many debased melodies which vulgar ears since know from the real. But the true Negro folk song lives in the hearts of those who have heard them truly sung and in the hearts of the Negro people. I don't know what that says about him having an innate, surprising, unexpected reaction to the music. That's just not going to be the answer. D. The songs are indeed the sifting of centuries. So a sifting of centuries suggests it's learned over time. The music is far more ancient than the words, and if we can trace it here and there, signs of development. Now, this suggests kind of learned. It doesn't really show too much about surprise, and that's not going to be our answer. The best answer looks like it's going to be B. Note how we find the particular conditions required of the claim, and then make sure we find those in the correct answer. Okay, this is another command of evidence where we're directly challenging. So that's going to be weakens. We're going to try and weaken the claim rather than strengthen it. And we got to figure out what the claim is. So let's go ahead and read. A member of the Otomi, an indigenous people in central Mexico, Octavio Medellin integrated to the United States as a child, and his sculpture bears the impress of traditions on both sides of the border. So the traditions on both sides of the border you can think of as just impressed him. They made an impact on him. And these are the US-based and the Mexican modernist-based. So his work, his artwork is both Mexican and American in culture, it looks like. Okay? And then goes on Mexican, including Maya. So this is going to be our claim, the underlying claim. In his 1950 masterpiece, History of Mexico, Medellin fuses these influences, that is both U.S. and Mexican cultural influences, into a style so idiosyncratic, that means kind of unique or unusual, so unique, that it resists efforts to view his work through the lens of nationality or cultural identity. Okay, because he's mixing everything together so much you can't say this is just U.S. or Mexican or modern or indigenous. It's not, either one culture or one nation or anything, right? It's kind of this undescribable mix of everything, right? We want to weaken this. So to weaken this, we actually need to find a quote or an answer here. Yeah, it is a quote. They're all quotes looking at it here that basically shows you can view his work as, not so unique that it can't be seen as somewhat national or somewhat cultural, maybe somewhat Mexican, maybe somewhat indigenous or something like that, right? So let's try to find the answer that shows that we can look at it along one lines or another. A, although a number of ancient indigenous artistic traditions pictured human forms in a profile, the forms populating the surface of history of Mexico suggest a specifically Maya influence. Okay, a number of traditions pictured him, the forms of... Okay, that has a specific Maya influence. I'm not sure that says we can view it through the lens of that culture. I won't throw that out. Okay, let's keep going though. In A History of Mexico, the synthesis of ancient modernist traditions functions as a stylistic parallel to the work's subject matter, a survey of centuries of Mexican history. No, here we're actually synthesizing ancient modernist traditions that might support the fusion of influences. I think that's kind of opposed to what we want. So I'm not crossing out A, well, I'll partially hold A there. C, many critics focus on indigenous influences in A History of Mexico and other key works by Medellin, to the exclusion of influences from indigenous art. Focus on indigenous influences and other key works to the exclusion of non-indigenous art. Influences from. So is this kind of saying he has indigenous influences and other non-indigenous influences, which means this is not going to be the right idea, right? That actually shows he's fusing different styles. We're not looking at from any one. Even though the critics are focusing on one, it has more. I don't think that's the right answer because the claim says we cannot view it from one way or another. And of course, we want to weaken that claim, so we want an answer that shows we can only view it through one way. All right, let's go D. Hopefully this is going to be good, or we may have to go back to A. D. While A History of Mexico features modernist motifs, it relies primarily on angular forms in a profile, a staple of Maya sculpture, and thus invites classification as indigenous art. So wait, okay, so this is saying it is primarily this Mayan style, and it can be classified as indigenous art. It can be classified among one cultural line. That's weakening the argument. We can't view it through that cultural or national classification. I think D is going to be our answer. Okay. Although a number of agencies formed the horns populating the surface of just a specifically Maya influence. Again, that's an influence. That's not saying we classify it as Mayan only. Here we say we classify it as indigenous. I think A is wrong. D is the correct answer. This, even if you get the right idea, it's not so hard to sort of get the basic idea of what we need. The answers are a little confusing and hard to differentiate. I believe the answer is D. Okay, we've got another command of evidence. We want to weaken the hypothesis here. So let's read the background and figure out what the hypothesis is. A student performs an experiment testing her hypothesis, okay, that a slightly acidic soil environment is more beneficial for the growth of the plant, whatever it is, choisum, okay, than a neutral soil environment. So slightly acidic, more beneficial to growth than neutral. Her experiment, she plants 16 seeds of choisum in a mixture of equal amounts of coffee grounds, which are highly acidic. So she has planting in coffee grounds, and I guess some mix of coffee grounds and potting soil, and another 16 seeds in potting soil without coffee grounds. That's her control. So we have coffee and we don't have coffee. The two groups were exposed to the same growing conditions and monitored for 3 weeks. Okay, so if the conclusion is, if her hypothesis is true, the coffee ground plants will grow more. But we want to weaken it. So we actually want the coffee ground plants grow less, and the control group, that's just soil, no coffee, grows more. Let's check the answer. A, the choisum planted in the soil without coffee grounds should grow more if we're weakening the hypothesis. Grew significantly taller. That's good. And that's compared to, we have to have a comparison here to our control group, than the choisum planted in the soil mixture. This is good. Soil mixture and coffee grounds. Okay. So without coffee grew more than with coffee. That's going to be our answer. The choice sum grown in the soil without coffee grounds weighed. I'm not sure weighed is the right metric here. Let's be careful. Does this say kind of the same idea though? Without coffee grounds grew less. No, it would be with coffee grounds growing less, not without coffee grounds. This is wrong for our weakened argument claim. So it's the wrong way anyway, okay? C, the choice sum seeds planted in the soil without coffee grounds sprouted later than did the seeds planted in the mixture. Okay, later, this is not about time, right? It says more beneficial for the growth, not later, sooner. The idea of time is simply not in the experiment, so that's not going to be right. D, significantly fewer the choice sum seeds planted in the soil without coffee grounds sprouted plants than did the seeds planted in the mixture of soil and coffee grounds. So could beneficial for growth mean the number of seeds versus like how tall it gets? Possibly. Is this going in the same direction though? So what do we have? Soil without coffee ground was fewer. Soil with coffee ground would therefore been more. That's the hypothesis she thought, but we want to weaken it. So it is going against our direction as well. A is the right answer.